Hey class, we're going to go ahead and just get started here, and if you have any questions, just feel free to send me a message, but do try to keep up with the calendar on Canvas. It'll tell you what to do each day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. What we talked about before break were the three methods of solving a quadratic equation, and they are graphing, square root method, and factoring. And I want to first talk to you, why are there so many methods to solve these equations? The first method, graphing, remember, occurs wherever the graph hits the x-axis. So in this case that I've drawn up here, these would be my two answers. And so you might say x is maybe, like, let's say we just talk about one of our answers. Maybe it's 1.5 between 1 and 2, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's something really close like that, or something like that. So the question is, I just don't know. So unless the answer is exact, I don't want to use the graphing method. The second method is the square root method, and we use the square root to cancel an exponent of 2. So, that'll work here, but as soon as I try to square root this x, I'll just be left with this. So while I want my answer to read x equals some number, I'll be stuck with square root of x. So that won't work if there is a x without a square attached. And the last one, plainly, if you think of how we factor, remember, and you're going to need this a lot for today, you are going to multiply to the n number, add to the middle number. So if we think of what multiplies to 5 and adds to 2, and why this method doesn't always work, well, there's nothing that multiplies to 5 and adds to 2. Your only choice would be 5 times 1. Okay, that equals 5. But if you try to do 5 plus 1, we get 6, which is not the answer we needed. We needed a 2. So this is a way factoring doesn't work. So there are two other methods that we're going to learn about over the next couple days. And we're going to start by reviewing complete the square that we talked about briefly before school got canceled. So this would have been 2 weeks before spring break. Okay, so here's how you complete the square. What you want to do is make sure first, if you're following along, go ahead and write down the problem. First, you want to make sure that A is always 1, and A, as a reminder, is always the number out front, followed by B. So you put A, B, and C. So A always has to be 1. And if you look at all these examples, I've made sure to do that. We are not going to look at problems that have an A value other than 1, but it is worth mentioning. The second thing is how to complete the square, and here's what we're going to do. I want to factor this in a way that each factor is identical. So if you start by, on number 1, doing multiply to 60, add to 16, we are going to have two factors that multiply to 60, and since 60 is positive, my signs are going to be the same. So I look over here, and since 16 is positive, we're going to say plus plus. Now, if I think of numbers that actually fit that mold, I'm going to pick 10 and 6, right? Because 10 times 6 is 60, 10 plus 6 is 16. Now, the problem here is that these are not identical, okay? Not the same. So, you will start each time by moving your C value. Let's go ahead and put those labels back up. There's A, B, C. So we're going to subtract 60 from both sides and leave this spot blank for that's where the 60 was. And then I'll tell you we're going to have to do that on the other side as well. And what I want to come up with is a number that if I factor here, I get multiply to something, add to 16. Okay, well, if you think of the only number plus itself that gives you 16, you got to use 8. So if I think of, okay, well, what multiplies together if I use 2 8s? The answer is 64. I'm going to show you an easier, quicker way on number 2 of how to get this number every time. But that's the idea. I want to make sure, okay, well, I had one of my clues. 8 plus 8 is 16, so the magic number over here I needed was 64. Now what you do with that 64 is you factor it, and it becomes these two numbers. The reason it is important is not so much that it is here, that turns into two factors, but also that you got to remember to add it to the right-hand side. Right-hand side. Okay, we got to balance the equation. So this is going to become 4. Okay, and since these two are identical, I'm going to rewrite this. Hopefully you remember this very briefly from before break. And that's the factor step. Okay, complete the square combines factoring and, since we have an exponent of 2, the square root step, which remember also produces two answers, and we use that to mean plus or minus. And then one last thing, to get m by itself, we'll subtract 8. Okay, now remember, plus or minus, it's nice if it can go in between the two numbers rather than to the left of all those numbers. And this is -8 plus 2, -8 minus 2. So my two answers are -6 and -10. Here's a quicker approach looking at number 2. Your step should be to move C. Okay, so 99 is negative, means it gets added, and leave a place to complete the square. So -10 plus 99 is 89, and I got to balance that. So this is the complete the square step, and I said I'd show you a quicker way to do it. You're going to take half of the middle number. So last time we had 16, and we took a half and got 8. And then we multiplied it by itself, or squared it. So what we'll get here is half of 20, and then 10 squared gives us 100. Okay, so we factor here. This is going to be 189. If I think of what multiplies to 100 and adds to 20, remember that's from here, then I'm going to pick 10 and 10. And I'm going to write that as a square. Give you a second to catch up if you're following along. Okay, so the reason we want to write it like this is so that we can come back to, okay, we did our factoring, now we do our square root. And even though there's a k and a 10 in here, the square absorbs this square root, and the k plus 10 is all that remains. Under here, you're going to get a non-perfect square that I would put into your calculator. Regardless of what the number is, it is going to be plus or minus. And if I put into my calculator square root 189, hit enter, let's round that to 13.7. And then I just break my problem apart like I did before. And my two answers are 3.7, -23.7. And those are approximate. So we want to use kind of the squiggle or the approximate symbol anytime we round. Okay. Number 3, we're going to move our C. It's positive, therefore we subtract it. And we leave a spot to complete the square. 6 minus 102 is -96. And we got to balance the equation, so we'll complete the square on the right. And remember how we did that last time. It's half the middle number, half of 4, which is 2, and then 2 squared is 4. Okay, so if I multiply to 4, add to 4, I'm going to get, let's again remember, so this is going to be -92. And if I multiply to 4, my options are 4 times 1 and 2 times 2. But remember, you also have to add to 4, and 4 plus 1 is 5, which eliminates that. I'm going to pick 2 plus 2. And there are two of them, so we write that as squared. And a little curveball here. There's a way to determine with graphing and with the square root method if you have no solution. For instance, if you're using a graph, we say that the graph intersects the x-axis at our solutions. A no solution graph will not intersect. So how do you tell if there's no graph? Well, if you're taking a square root of a negative number, right away the answer is no solution. I'm going to work through this problem silently. At this point, if you feel like you get the gist, go to Pearson and look up the assignment, complete the square, and go ahead and finish that and turn it in by Thursday night. It should be noted that anytime you square any number, the answer is a positive.